let's see what Lan Pham has got to say.
Madam Speaker, water matters to every single one of us, and I really get sick of stating the bleeding obvious like that, but unfortunately we forget. We forget how foundational water is to us as human beings and how foundational water is when it comes to a functional planet. And we need progress so badly in this water services space because these challenges that we have across Aotearoa are so very real and they're not going away without significant intervention. But not progress like this, progress that takes us backwards rather than forward. So sadly, Madam Speaker, Te Pāti Kākariki will not be supporting this bill tonight. And there's three initial reasons why. Firstly, the health of our people. We don't support the narrowing of the scope of who does and doesn't need to comply with the regulatory standards. Now, this is under the guise of reducing regulatory burden of the drinking water quality regime. But, Madam Speaker, the inequities when it comes to access to clean, healthy water and access to wastewater and stormwater networks that don't unnecessarily pollute our environment and ourselves is staggering. I recall just over a year ago when Tahuna, Queenstown was wrestling with its cryptosporidium outbreak. That absolutely got headlines and attention, and even international attention, and we should all be well aware of the Havelock North tragedy that this country experienced. But what needs as much attention is the thousands of Kiwis who experience this rolling risk profile of ongoing boil water notices and the like in places like Ward in Marlborough, in Waimate in South Canterbury, in places like Te Kao in Te Tai Tokerau, and so many other places where our people are throwing a dice every time they turn on the tap for a drink, at their home, on marae, at their school, on their farm, at their place of work. So we need strong protections when it comes to protection and regulation of these small and rural water supplies in place, particularly in light of the recent Ministry for the Environment report on rural drinking water, which found concerning levels of E. coli and nitrates in schools. Secondly, the health of Te Taiao. It's incredibly disappointing that this government is continuing to not recognise the importance of Te Mana o Te Wai in water services, considering we literally cannot have human health improvements without the improvements of Te Taiao. And thirdly, if the government's going to make any changes, especially foundational changes to the governance and delivery of water services here in Aotearoa, then the government actually needs to act like they live in Aotearoa, where Te Tiriti o Waitangi is our foundation. And that means what some have called co-governance, but what more appropriately is just called governance. It's actually partnering with iwi and hapu in appropriate governance over wai and water service delivery. Madam Speaker, I want to acknowledge our councils and councillors in the context of this bill. They've had to spend the last few months tasked with the unenviable task of working out their water service delivery plans and talking about partnerships with councils around them in the absence of the full legislative framework. And it's made it hugely challenging, if not impossible, to actually meaningfully engage with communities and get their views. So it's so important that they submit on this bill, and it's so important that they engage with their communities. We're really concerned about the plans to push the full cost of the regulators onto local communities, and we just heard from Palmerston North City Council that they've estimated that to be in the realm of $400K a year, and no doubt much higher costs for smaller councils. We're really happy to see the protections against privatisation, but of course we want to make sure that these are really strong. Madam Speaker, healthy drinking water is and should be recognised as a human right, and we want strong local voice and control at every stage of this bill ahead.
Just before I take the next...
So that's, I'm intrigued what Barbara's got to say, but it is interesting hearing about what the different issues are in the communities.
Oh, yeah. So I really liked the speech because it highlighted Te Tiriti.
Yes.
I was going through the fact sheet for the bill, and it says on page 3, and I quote, regardless of the future water service delivery arrangements councils choose to use, existing responsibilities, commitments and obligations between iwi, Māori and the Crown under Local Government Act 2002 and under the treaty settlement legislation will continue to apply. Now, I don't know if anyone sees the problem here, but the problem here is that the Act parties try to define what the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi are without the input of iwi and hapu. And the National Party has pledged to restore the rights of local referendum on the establishment of ongoing use of Māori wards. So this means that Māori could have their ability to contribute to local government decision-making diminished or potentially even removed under some circumstances. Yes. So, yes, when you look at this bill at a wider scope in the context of everything else that's being passed, like on its own, it's like, oh yeah, that sounds reasonable. We'll give councils the flexibility they need to be able to provide services to local people. It's awesome. Hey, I'm a libertarian socialist. I love that shit. And then I look at what else they've passed and I'm like, oh no. Oh fuck.
Yeah, it's